Yeah, Antona, let's go to the next place.
Siyeva mar, staliva.
Sizobona nje, wena shaya imoto.
Emrang ne feeling with Levanta by failures. I don't think they don't feel this GNU thing.
Hi, how are you? My name is Mathibedi. This is my brother Melusi. Do you mind if we ask you a question?
Can you tell me, how do you feel about the government of national unity after a year?
They haven't achieved very much. There's been a lot of promises, but there's no positive change. Nothing's changed.
I feel like we are being screwed up. Getting a house is a struggle. Buying anything that is basic, you have to think. So you just have to choose between buying bread and buying maize meal, which is something that.
Of national unity, like sincerity, like a fragile. Yeah. Kaya school, but at the same time, like class bunny, just try some bunny. At the same time, like how they gonna wear the shoe on your nana.
Yes, there's been too much infighting. So I think the government, national, but unity is.
I think there's a lot of improvements. At least with robots working, they are fixing potholes and with robots. So there are improvements.
I'm just going to be honest. I voted for the ANC when we started out. I was so excited because I thought there was going to be change. And still today, apartheid is still there. And I'm a colored, and we're right at the bottom. We also fought for the same right.
I think it can be better. I think we are a very diverse country, but I don't think everyone has equal opportunities at all. We don't provide for everyone.
I'm not happy with the government at all. Because they allow what to do. Bana ba rona ba taboga di drugs ba tsena dikolo ga ba hetsa ga bana gore ka re ngwana feditse wa mo isa somewhere bana ba tletse mo stress.
Not much different to I felt about the previous one, because I feel that there hasn't been much substantive change. Hopefully it will get better, because it's only been a short while.
Ooh, where am I?
In your head, perhaps?
What happened? Why am I... Wait, who are you?
I'm that voice, here to remind you of the English heatwave, the insane humidity. You jumping on a plane only to land in freezing Joburg after a year away. And then, hours later, hopping on another plane with your work buddies. No time for friends, no time for family. Just straight into running community meetings and...
Yo, chill out, my man. Besides, who on earth are you?
The irony. Chill out, he says after crashing.
Crash? I don't booze or smoke.
I've never seen that letter in its physical form. I've never received it. And when I spoke to the Deputy President and Party Leader in Parliament, that was his response to me, that some in his digital signature has been abused.
The whipper status of Commander Ncala Ncala. He was a deputy whip, remember, and no longer a whip. We decided to terminate that for the reasons that were given to him. There is a letter that was written by my office on the 23rd of June 2025.
Or abuse my position just to tell some foolish lies, only to be called out by my boss, like some political novice.
Whoa, that escalated quickly.
You think? Try leaving a cult for a senior position in a movement that seems like the new Moses leading Israelites through the desert. Then, months later, you're sacked for attending a church gathering during Passover.
I've decided not to renew the membership of the EFF because I will join and participate in Umkhonto Wesizwe party.
After our SG had visited Malawi, there were quite a number of things that came. We received a lot of letters from, what do you call them? Civil society. Was it the civil society? I doubt.
He visited a fugitive. It was bound to escalate, right?
If that's the real reason. Hey, do you think the prophecy was that the fugitive sees a future of unemployment for the fellow? Wild, considering that Bashiri's known for promising people jobs and whatever their hearts desire.
Okay, you can stop now.
What for? Your righteous indignation is laughable.
What?
Yeah, you're like some white South Africans who are now policing the mentioning of the N-word.
Yes, of course. The N-word is...
Offensive? And what? Should only be sung by racist Afrikaners at Saki parties?
No.
We are Homo sapiens. They've got Neanderthal blood in them. This is the science, and this is not science that was done by black people, it was done by them.
But of course they live on in our DNA because we've got something like 2%, many of us, in our DNA of Neanderthals.
Ah, I see. You're just being mischievous like this Nota Boloy fellow.
Better mischief than foolishness, like the great white American hope.
Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things.
Then he and his even more clueless Afrikaner fan base couldn't back up a single claim.
Melusi, give it a rest.
You're bitter. You sound like Ofaru, ranting like a bitter ex spitting venom.
It's going to happen, it's happening. Without him. He's not here. I heard people say he's here, he's doing this. He's not here. He's not here. And it's not our interest to entertain such nonsense. So we as a matter of principle, SG and policy position, we're no longer going to answer any nonsense about Mbuyiseni Ndlovu. Never.
It is that tactic of entanglement which, in my view, was responsible for the heavy losses, as it were, that we saw the EFF sustain in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, being overtaken in Mpumalanga, as well as in the National Assembly.
We literally don't want anything to do with MK. We even asked them not to come to funerals of EFF.
You should get up. You are causing panic.
Like the GNU every time it is about to fall apart and capitalists freak out?
Huh. No wonder we've had no show for more than 3 years. Will we now? Or is he thankfully out for the count? It's showtime.
Hello, good people. Welcome to TTBIA, the thinking behind it all. This is where we decode and break down media text, searching for hidden messages and underlying meanings. We ask critical questions. Who is the author targeting? What makes us receptive or skeptical of the news? And when the occasion calls for it, we separate fact from fiction. We do this to become more responsible, informed news consumers, and in turn, better activists in our own spaces.
On the front pages with your host Melusi Ncala.
Can we declare 2024 the most dramatic, thrilling, and jam-packed year in living memory, baby boomers aside? For Gen Z, Millennials, and Gen X, it doesn't get more explosive than this. Cat Williams foreshadowing uncomfortable truths.
It's God's side and the other side. And we don't care nothing about the other side. Period. All of these big dick deviants is all catching hell in 2024. It's up for all of them. It don't matter if you Diddy or whoever you is.
Over 1 billion views on President Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson.
With the backing of whom?
With
the backing of CIA, of course. The organization you wanted to join back in the day, as I understand. We should thank God they didn't let you in. Although, it is a serious organization. I understand.
Political comebacks. near-death experiences.
That's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that's sad, take a look at what happened.
And elections in more than 64 countries, even if the dodgy outcome of at least one was overturned through mass student protests.
The movement we've witnessed in Bangladesh over the past month is being called the first revolution led by Gen Z. We've seen a mass uprising by students of Bangladesh who are angry over an unfair job system.
If not for you, then certainly for me. Considering my short, pitiful existence in this anti-poor, anti-human, war-ravaged, godless world, it's been riveting. In South Africa, the crescendo arrived on 29 May 2024. National and provincial elections were held, and you could feel it in the air. Something was cooking.
Well, the results are not correct. I think the institutions must satisfy us that they did look into the issues.
Oops, wrong phrase. Correction. What became clear in the days that followed was this. South Africa's political landscape had shifted. After the 7th national elections, the ANC, longtime security guards of SA Incorporated, was reduced to just 40%, a 17-point drop from the previous polls. President Cyril Ramaphosa's popularity, as talk radio hosts repeatedly reminded us prior to voting day, spoke volumes. Would the African National Congress finally become humble and self-correct? Sorry, did I just put humility and ANC in the same sentence? Lightning strike incoming. Would the ANC turn to its political offspring, the Umkhonto weSizwe Party and the Economic Freedom Fighters, to form a government?
The turning point came when we realized what we had to do to prevent a coalition of MK, EFF and ANC. That would have been a total disaster for the economy.
Oh wait, Madam and her backers are calling the shots now. What about a minority government? It would allow the ANC to focus inward and to seek allies on a case-by-case basis. Even the SACP, South African Communist Party, a key ANC ally, hinted at this option in reports aired by the SABC.
The party says it will not align itself with the DA and keep course on their anti-capitalist trajectory.
We support the minority government with GNU features, that is Government of National Unity features, without the role and participation of DA-led forces.
But alas, it would not be so. Early on, the Sunday Times and Times Live reported on the ANC's push for a so-called Government of National Unity, GNU. Their headline, Beaten ANC pushes for Government of National Unity. Ouch. Harsh, but true. Then came floods of articles from News 24 working overtime to manufacture consent. Their angle? A GNU, especially one with a DA-ANC alliance, was what the market wanted. Yes, the markets. Even the Independent Electoral Commission fanned these flames before announcing results.
South Africa is almost, waiting for us. The markets.
One of News 24's most read headlines at the time? Coalition government. GNU deal in striking distance as the clock ticks down. The piece admitted that nothing was finalized, but still told readers what the deal between the DA and the ANC should look like. They even mentioned the now notorious Statement of Intent, eventually signed by ANC's Secretary General Fikile Faupa Mbalula. Reuters at least cut through the fluff with a more direct headline. South Africa's president urges unity as ANC support plunges. The only thing missing was the word outgoing before president. But hey, priorities. Especially when investors are scared of commies getting the reins. Eventually, a grand coalition was formed. Maybe this is what they saw coming all along. The SABC reported it.
So help me God. The country's 7th democratic elections have forced political parties with different ideologies to work together. As observers and South Africans alike are pondering on how the new government of national unity will work and if it will stand the test of time, the other question that lingers is, since erstwhile political parties are now working together, who will hold the executive accountable?
The BBC also covered Ramaphosa's re-election.
Now, the ANC leader Cyril Ramaphosa has been re-elected as the president of South Africa. He won a parliamentary vote after his party, the African National Congress, struck a deal with its opponents. The ANC lost its majority in elections last month. Mr. Ramaphosa spoke of a new era of hope in South Africa, saying the people expected the parties involved to work together to tackle poverty, unemployment and inequality.
And then, voila! South Africa had a government. Wait, my bad. A government of national unity, where the ANC held the majority of the ministries, the DA secured 6 ministries, and the rest were handed out to rebranded gangsters, tribal provocateurs, and groupies who claim to be progressive, but didn't flinch when asked money or principle. It didn't take long before the inevitable happened. GNU partners, especially the DA, began barking with no bite. They threatened to leave after certain bills were passed into law, but didn't.
Let's start off with this. President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill into law. He will, however, delay the Act's full implementation by 3 months to allow for further consultation. The bill had been dodged by controversy from the very inception. Its critics, which include the Democratic Alliance.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed into law the expropriation bill. The legislation has been 5 years in the making, following public consultations and parliamentary deliberations. The Democratic Alliance has strongly opposed.
The National Assembly prepares to vote on the 2025 fiscal framework. The ANC and the DA still do not see eye to eye on the budget.
Their biggest scare came about a year after the GNU was born.
For that reason, the Democratic Alliance's federal executive, which met at 1 p.m. today
for lunch,
has resolved to withdraw from the national dialogue with immediate effect.
There's much more to unpack, but for now, those are the highlights. Our job is to analyze these news texts, unpack the deeper messages, and offer critical commentary.
The Stars with Naledi.
Hey, it's your girl Ledstar, aka Naledi. You know what's up. The entertainment industry in Mzansi is always full of drama, and your girl is going to keep you all updated on some of the latest tea about some of your fave celebs. But today we're shaking the table differently. We're talking politics, we're talking culture, we're talking the government of national unity, and how the people with the biggest platforms are saying the least. So when this topic came up, I was actually really curious. I thought, I can't wait to see what our faves have to say about the GNU. But then, once I started doing research, babes, I was shocked, but not really. Because guess what? They haven't said much at all. It's giving silence. It's giving safe. It's giving don't rock the boat.
Aye, aye, Captain!
Let's be real. It's been over a year since the GNU took shape. We've seen press briefings, power-sharing debates, new faces, old problems. But in all that time, most celebs have been quiet, crickets. And that silence, it's loud. These are people with thousands, even millions of followers. But when the country's being restructured right in front of us, where's their voice? Instead, they're posting designer fits, vacation pics, or branded content while the rest of us are wondering if load shedding is going to ruin another recording session. Let's not lie, some celebs aren't using the platforms we gave them to talk about things that actually affect the people who support them. And speaking of people not doing what they're supposed to, enter GaytonMcKenzie, Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture. Since the GNU election, this man has had more photo ops than actual policies. I mean, so we didn't ask for PR stunts and motivational Instagram posts. We asked for functioning theaters, real artist support, funding that actually lands in the right hands. Instead, we're getting TikTok-style content while the arts sector is bleeding. If we wanted performance, we'd go to a show, not the ministry. But anyways, some celebs are talking. So today, we're giving props to the ones speaking truth and spilling the tea on those pushing back against the silence. Thandiswa Mazwai, the legendary King Ta, born in Soweto, known for Afro soul classics and radical honesty, dropped the truth bomb on X in March 2025. Black artists are not supported until they die. Then ministers come with wreaths and fake tears. Stop using us for PR, pay us while we're still alive. Fans reacted to this with one saying, "Sis, Thandiswa always telling the truth. This unity thing they're selling doesn't include us artists." Another fan said, "These celebs are always crying. Try a real job." Now, that's how you use your platform. Zakes Bantwini from Durban to the Grammys. Zakes is an icon in Afro House and a businessman who's long spoken about the economy of the arts. On Podcast and Chill with Mac G, mid-2024, he didn't hold back. "We don't need handouts, we need structure, infrastructure. You can't preach about a new government when the old system still treats its artists like stepchildren." People in the YouTube comments said, "I wish more artists spoke like this. Man understands governance." Another said, "But didn't Zakes get booked by the state? Now he's complaining?" Ntsiki Mazwai, always loud, always bold, the poet, artist and activist has never been scared to clap back at the system, or even other celebs. In Feb 2025, she posted this: "Mobilizing artists feels so right. Maybe this will lead to an artists union." People on X replied with, "Finally someone said it. GNU is not unity, it's elite consolidation." Another said, "She's always bitter, never has a solution." But let's be honest, sometimes bitter is just unfiltered honesty. Now, here's the real gag. None of these artists explicitly mention the government of national unity by name, but maybe that's part of the problem. The GNU was supposed to be about inclusivity, about new energy, about working together. But when celebs with massive platforms avoid saying anything real, it's giving brand preservation, not people protection. And yet, these are the same people who get booked by municipalities, campaign for political parties, and pop up on heritage posters. Where's the accountability? Where's the engagement? Some are using their influence to ask real questions. Others, just vibes and filtered selfies. So, to go back to what I said in the beginning, think a little bit more about who you follow.
What's the word? An opinion with our guest speaker.
I'm Kim Heller. I'm a writer, a political analyst, and the author of a book, No White Lies, Black Politics and White Power in South Africa. And I'm just about to finish my next book. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Kim, for joining us on The Thinking Behind It All, TTBA. What messages have you identified in the news media about the so-called GNU in its first year?
Well, I think as we would expect, the mainstream media, which is conservative in its nature and I think has yet to transform adequately, has been very welcoming of what you call, and it's quite interesting that you call it a so-called government of national unity, because I think it's still a beast that we have to identify. But what we've seen from the media is an embrace, and that embrace has to do with the fact, in my view, that we now have at least a visible white partner to the government, this black government that the media has perhaps never embraced fully. So we're hearing a lot about how the GNU now is a healthy thing, a stable thing. It's almost like there's a maturation of the politics of South Africa, as if a more visible white face gives it some kind of adult complexion. I think it's like countering a new black government, actually, that there's a sense of security that at least white hands are now involved. And that once again displays the untransformed government, which I suppose is reflective of society at large.
How would you describe the main or dominant narrative about the GNU as termed by those in power?
It's almost like we have another chance to get our government right, but it's almost like a patriotic alliance in a way that we now have a formal pact between white and black political interests. What's very problematic to me is that the GNU is being seen as almost the will of the people. It's something that's good for the people, where in real terms, this was a compromise government. There was no outright winner, obviously, in the last election. So this is not the will of the people. It's not even a democratic outcome. But the media has been quick to accept it because it speaks to the business interests. So it's being described as something that is not only democratic, but a patriotic decision, a mature decision. Why I'm mentioning the mature decision is that it's almost like an embrace of the white man as the ultimate responsible politician, almost caretaking the ANC. And that's consistent with the white supremacist attitude that the media has always displayed.
How have news reporters represented debates over whether the 7th administration is a grand coalition or a government of national unity?
I think perhaps they've done it more as a unity government. And I think that's being very kind, as I was saying, because this is not a government of national unity. This is a government of convenience. In fact, it's quite strange because in 1994, we saw what I described in my book as an unconsummated marriage, an inconvenient marriage between white interests and a new black government. And it's so crazy that we almost have that collaboration again, 30 years into democracy, where the government should be on track to serve black interests and almost take a black consciousness approach. And now we have, once again, a terrible compromise. But the media certainly are describing it as a national unity, almost going back to the nostalgia of 1994. And this kind of has an emotional component to it because it's almost saying to people like 1994, embrace this. You know, this is a reconciliatory type of government. So I think we almost have a supersizing now of the rainbow nation once again, as if that wasn't a disaster. But now we have it twice. You know, you have to wonder what kind of voters are we and what kind of government are we propelling, that we once again have a compromised government. But of course the media wouldn't say that. They are touting it in very positive terms, which it is not actually. This is just the art of propaganda.
Which voices are amplified and which are marginalized by the mainstream South African media coverage of the Ramaphosa DA government?
One of the crazy things is that President Cyril Ramaphosa emerges as a hero. And I must say that this is a man who's taken ANC to its lowest performance since 1994, where the majority of the support was lost. But I must say that there's been a lot of brilliant media propaganda, which has shown this as a success for even Ramaphosa. We see how invested the media is in Ramaphosa being successful. So that's the work of media. It's actually a masterful creation of a great failure by Cyril Ramaphosa has been touted as a success for South Africa. So we must applaud the efforts of the media to maintain this profile. And of course, John Steenhuisen or any white politician would be treated and exalted as a hero figure. And here we have a very mediocre white man, very uneducated. And unlike black politicians, he had ample opportunity to be educated, yet he's an uneducated man. And he's treated as a very responsible and formidable person and politician, where to me he's just a dreadful politician. So, you know, we shouldn't be surprised that those kind of people are being amplified. Anyone in the DA, especially a white man, would be portrayed as somebody we should respect. And we have to look at how he's been treated so fairly or over fairly when the previous DA leader, Melusi Ncala, was treated quite differently. So the racial projection and portrayal of politicians is still a factor of media narrative. And of course, what we see in contrast to this is how the MK has been villainized as a tribal party, as a party that's run by criminals. And that's very unfortunate because the party has done exceptionally well, whatever we may think of it as individuals with our own political views. This, to me, was the party that surprised all of us analysts. And rather than portraying it well as a game changer in the political landscape, it's been described in just really ugly tribal terms. I don't believe it's a tribal party. I believe it's a party that's commanded a large share of voters and has done very well. And of course, the EFF is seen as the problem child rather than as a revolutionary voice that's much needed in South Africa.
Who in South African society is portrayed as heroes, anti-heroes, and villains in the unfolding coalition government narrative?
John Steenhuisen has emerged as the Superman of this new politics that we see. And he's projected always as a moderate voice, as a sensible voice. The whole racial aspect has been taken out of it. The absurdity of a white man running the second largest party in South Africa is never seen as problematic. It's seen as sensible, and that we can almost find a sense of stability in him. As I was saying earlier, Cyril Ramaphosa is seen as a hero where he's actually a failed leader. He's consistently projected as somebody, despite his failings, who can still save South Africa. So we see the DA-ANC coalition as positive for South Africa, as if it's going to lead us into the promised land of milk and honey. But in truth, it's only looking after the interests of whiteness, you know, just to keep white control. And of course, Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC, you know, are merely following this path because they've been proved to be more a party of white interests than of black dignity. So all these false dogmas and missteps by both Cyril and John are ignored, as they are portrayed as people that we can trust to lead us into a better South Africa. The absurdity of Cyril Ramaphosa being treated still as a statesman, as a responsible president, is particularly problematic because of the scandals that still really should be haunting him, but which the media want us to forget about. So the Phala matter is a serious matter. We have a deeply compromised president who may well be guilty of serious criminal activity, and yet that narrative isn't projected in the media. So what they've done successfully is to turn a potential villain into a man that we must trust. And then the anti-heroes really have been Julius Malema. In fact, the media has always been very harsh on Malema. The only time I recall them being favorable was when he took a strong anti-Zuma stance. Then they treated him as the darling of the media. But, Julius Malema is now back to being the irrational child. But I think the group that's been most villainized has been the party of Jacob Zuma. Everybody in the MK party has been treated as if they're just thugs almost. And I don't think that's a fair portrayal, because if we look at the caliber of some of the MPs of the MK party, they're exceptionally talented individuals. If we think of somebody like Brian Molefe, I think is one of the most intelligent voices that we've had, an experienced man who's obviously faced a lot of propaganda, but presents a very rational voice in Parliament. But that's never discussed. It's always the corruption of Jacob Zuma, which is yet to be proved in any court of law.
Given that perception is critical in politics, what appears to be working for proponents of the so-called GNU?
I think they obviously have prized access to good media stories. Media are doing a good work to create a master narrative to which we must all subscribe. And I also think that there's been a characterization of the need for unity over complete disarray. And once again, I think that has a racist element, that because now we have a more prominent white component, white people in government and in business is equated with stability and maturity. Our politics, if we look at historically in apartheid and throughout the ages in South Africa, there's always been a large component of the politics of fear. So I think the media have really pushed the fear of instability. And it's very noteworthy that when John Steenhuisen was in the Oval Office with Trump, he spoke of how the unity government was important because it kept out players such as MK and EFF, as if those two parties are going to create great chaos in South Africa. So that narrative of chaos, that narrative of fear, is omnipresent in the media. And that gives the GNU a credibility that it shouldn't have. Just the last thing, if I may add, is that everything is always related to the markets. The markets are the supreme branch of the ANC. So we always taught about how the markets are happy when there's a more moderate government, as if we must always pander to the interests. The market doesn't care about black dignity or justice, but we must always bow down to them. And that's an element that the media continue to bring into the picture.
What are opponents of the seventh government communicating effectively to the public? And what is missing and could be improved in their message?
One of the things that they use is the story of the ANC being a corrupt government, how the DA is going to bring in order and integrity. That, I think, needs to be challenged far more by opponents of the government, because the DA government has actually been guilty of quite a lot of corruption, but yet they project it very well. So I think that's a narrative that needs to be discounted. I think the biggest story that is not coming across well enough is the story of a backstep on transformation, because with the DA we can expect progressive legislation to be thrown out of Parliament rather than concluded. And there hasn't been enough about the betrayal of this government that it doesn't represent the voters' voice. Nobody voted for GNU, and that's not come out much. So once again, the black majority is not represented in Parliament. Nobody wanted this pact, nobody voted for it, yet it has a legitimacy that it doesn't deserve. And I think, unfortunately, because of the disunity of the Progressive Caucus, they're not positioning themselves well as a possible alternative.
How do you anticipate various news outlets will shape the quote-unquote GNU narrative moving forward?
The key message that's coming out is that we need a country that isn't falling apart, and obviously the narrative of black governments falling apart is always one of the key strands of the mainstream media. So they're going to keep speaking about how this government is going to boost international investment and the potential of jobs, the potential of greater stability. But we haven't seen that. If we look at the trends, there's been no investment because of the GNU. But that false story, that fictional story, is going to be told. So I think there's almost a cheerleading for the GNU across all the media. There's not enough scrutiny at all of what the GNU constitutes, even for the more so-called progressive media like the Mail and Guardian. There's not enough analysis. There's too much of a cheerleading, rallying around the GNU, and we see critical analysis not emerging. You know, they're emerging from people like you and alternative new age media that are completely independent. But in the mainstream media, there's been very little. So I think we're going to still see a continuation of the villainization of progressive forces, of the Progressive Caucus. And of course, the Progressive Caucus is not helping because it's just so fragmented and at war with itself. So I think stories like that will be amplified. Much of the same is going to continue. In
the Archives with JB.
Hello, it's JB here in the Archives of People's Stories. That's what history is. It's my story, your story, it's our story, and when I think of it like this, it makes learning a lot more fun. Anyone who knows me knows I ask questions all the time. I'm pretty picky about the answers I receive, too. As we rummage through these archives together, I want to share my questions, some of the answers I find, and most importantly, I hope this journey will leave you with questions of your own. Today, let's learn about something I've been hearing about ever since South Africa's 2024 elections. The often mentioned but ever elusive GNU. What is a government of national unity? Wikipedia says, a government of national unity is a broad coalition government consisting of all parties in the legislature, usually formed during a time of war or other national emergency. All parties in the legislature? Seems unlikely. Let's get a couple more definitions then. The MK Party says it's a coalition government formed by multiple political parties, usually during times of national crisis or after conflict, to promote stability and unity. Oxford Reference has this to say: a government that brings together a number of rival leaders and political parties in order to promote national unity and political stability. They are often formed after political crisis, after a period of conflict, or during a transition from one regime type to another. Let's look at a bit of GNU history to see how these definitions stack up. Hey Google, where did the term government of national unity come from? The MK Party's website has this: historical context and contemporary relevance. That's about as close as I could get to finding any kind of history. They say GNUs have played significant roles in various countries' political histories, particularly in post-conflict societies or during transitions from authoritarian regimes to democracies. Examples: South Africa's GNU 1994 to 1996, Zimbabwe's GNU 2009 to 2013, and Kenya's GNU 2008 to 2013. Finally, Google's friend Gemini says this: the specific term Government of National Unity gained prominence in the 20th century. Examples include World War I and II, where several countries like Canada and Sweden formed national unity governments to present a united front and effectively manage war efforts. The term is frequently used to describe governments formed during post-conflict situations to promote reconciliation and rebuild fractured societies. Examples include Rwanda after the 1994 genocide and South Africa after the end of apartheid in 1994. These definitions sound similar, but with important changes in nuance. We know that history sets precedents, so what was the first government of national unity? References point to South Africa, with President Nelson Mandela creating the first GNU. In earlier research, we did hear mention of countries having GNUs during World War I and II and in earlier times than 1994, but for the sake of what we're trying to learn here, let's stick to the basics. And as always, I encourage you to do your own research too. On 27 April 1994, Freedom Day, South Africa held its first elections under universal suffrage. The ANC won a resounding majority in the elections and Mandela was elected president. 6 other parties were represented in the national legislature, and among them, under the provisions of an interim constitution, the NP and the IFP won enough seats to participate alongside the ANC in a single-term government of national unity. These parties participated after being invited by the ANC, who had won an overwhelming majority. Also, in terms of a constitutional provision, F.W. de Klerk was appointed Mandela's second deputy president. So, is a GNU a coalition government? I'm feeling a bit confused. The South African government's website Q&A says, a coalition government exists when 2 or more political parties or independent representatives combine their votes in a legislature or a council to elect a government and to support the decisions it takes. This becomes necessary when no single party has a majority of the seats in a legislature or council. It goes on to say that the first democratic government after the 1994 elections was a broad-based coalition, a government of national unity. It sounds to me like they're using these terms interchangeably, coalition government and government of national unity, but words matter, right? Except for the current administration, it appears that understandings of GNU have the following traits: multiple parties, rivalries or rival parties, and, most importantly, conflict or war. So, why would President Cyril Ramaphosa and the 2024 ANC characterize this government as a GNU and not a coalition? What's the conflict? The white genocide experienced by Elon Musk and company? You decide. Ultimately, they may control the narrative, but they can't rewrite your reality. Until our next time in the archives, just remember, the story is as much in the wording as it is in the words.
Beneath the Headlines with Lana Manson.
For this episode, we're decoding key messages in 3 news texts related to the GNU or on issues surrounding it. Leading the breakdown of these texts is Lana Manson, an educator by profession, a literacies buff by choice, and a good friend of the show. Both of us are lifelong students of critical literacy theories. Mostly because, well, I have nothing better to do with my time than unpack texts. Since this is a bonus episode, and the GNU has now been in existence for over a year, we've decided to look at what lies beneath the headlines of 3 news articles. The Financial Times piece is titled, "Is South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa running out of time?" And it's by Alec Russell, Monica Mark, and David Pilling. The Daily Maverick's article is titled, "SA's GNU turns 1. A year of unity, friction, and some green shoots." And it's by Rebecca Davis. And IOL's piece is titled, "1 year after landmark 2024 elections, South Africans still waiting for change. GNU stability and illusion." And it's by Kamohelo Muichela. First things first. What are the core messages in these articles?
So let me take you through each article one by one and highlight the core message. So if we look at the Financial Times, this article explores the challenges faced by South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, both domestically and internationally, on issues such as economic stagnation, political instability, and the strained relationships with the United States. And the article goes on to highlight the fragile coalition government between the ANC and the DA, the passing of a contested budget, the need for divisive reforms to address unemployment, corruption, and economic growth. And essentially, the article underscores the urgency for Ramaphosa to act boldly to prevent populist forces and secure South Africa's economic future while also managing complex international dynamics, particularly with the US of A.
Populist forces, they say.
Populist forces. That gets me every time I read it. I just, like, who and what does it mean? The Daily Maverick looks at the first year of South Africa's government of national unity, highlights the challenges, achievements, and public perceptions amidst ongoing economic struggles and political dynamics. I'd say the core message of this article is that South Africa's GNU has delivered a fragile stability, but has struggled to achieve meaningful progress on its promises. While the GNU has provided a sense of cooperation and avoided political collapse, its first year has been marked by, again, economic stagnation, unemployment, internal friction, and limited structural change. The article highlights the GNU survival depending on moving beyond symbolic unity and the need to deliver tangible reforms and results.
Spot the difference? Nope. That's because, thematically, the narrative is consistent. Fragility and friction, political stagnancy, and the question of whether the GNU will endure. Essentially, time is of the essence, lest these populist forces get their grubby black hands on the levers of power. Anyway, what about the Independent online?
So the IOL sort of highlights an end of an era. Overall, the article underscores the symbolic nature of the political shift, but questions its tangible impact on the lives of ordinary South Africans. 1 year after South Africa's elections that ended the ANC's post-apartheid dominance and introduced coalition politics through the GNU, the promised change and progress, much like the Daily Maverick, the article remains elusive. The article notes that the GNU has survived internal contradictions, but at the same time it has also failed to deliver necessary improvements in service delivery, infrastructure, economic opportunity.
Lana notes that while there are differences in tone and mood across the articles, there are also key points of convergence.
So I think if we look across all three of the articles, there is sort of this idea that the GNU has to move beyond the symbolic unity and start to develop tangibles. what these tangibles are is kind of different from the perspective of each of these different papers. The Financial Times, they're very critical of the GNU, but at the same time cautiously optimistic. You kind of get the sense that there's uncertainty and also like an urgency that if the GNU doesn't act in the correct way, if it doesn't do particular things, that it will collapse. At the same time, it's very much like you've got to do it our way, and if you don't do it our way, this is the end of it. South Africa is going to collapse. If we go to the IOL, the tone is a lot more critical and skeptical, and the mood is somber and disillusioned. Unlike the other two that sort of offer this glimmer of hope, the IOL article doesn't do that. I think what they portray is this idea that the GNU is a joke, really. And then the Daily Maverick, much like the Financial Times, is cautiously a lot more hopeful. It's reflective, but also highlights the frustrations and disappointments with the GNU over this past year.
The Financial Times and the Daily Maverick's tone and mood are underpinned by macroeconomic urgency, while IOL's tone and mood reflect more of what ordinary people are experiencing on the ground.
One point of evidence for that is the IOL article actually takes the voices of people who live in the areas that are affected by service delivery. The article actually references the citizens' views. So they look at two individuals from Ivory Park, areas that are affected by service delivery. One of the citizens that they reference sort of acknowledges that there have been some improvements, but overall, there's still a lot of things that need to be addressed. And then there's another, Getty Mafafa, criticizes the ongoing squabbles between the DA and the ANC within the GNU and states that their infighting is divisive and undermines the coalition's ability to succeed. And then she goes on to highlight that the DA's opposition to the ANC policies is a major issue.
Lana and I also discussed how these publications construct their narratives. The Financial Times piece hinges on the figure of Ramaphosa. The Daily Maverick highlights ANC and DA dynamics, and IOL focuses on tensions within the GNU and what the people think. But, as I said to Lana, there's also a noticeable attempt to divorce economics from ideology.
100%. The Financial Times article does this thing where it tries to position itself neutrally, that this is the way it ought to be. And in doing that, it undermines the fact that it is following an existing ideology, one of neoliberalism. And one of the things that stands out to me in the Financial Times article is this question about development and this comparison to other developing nations, that all of a sudden, if we're not careful, we're going to be overtaken by other developing nations. What is that? Who are we developing towards? What are we developing towards? What is the standard? Do we have to be American? Do we have to be European? Do we have to have that level of economy? What are we talking about?
Interestingly enough, for me, another narrative has to do with this swart gevaar. And that's what the Daily Maverick subtly jumps on when it others parties like the EFF, Economic Freedom Fighters, and the MK Umkhonto weSizwe. It's this, the alternative is worse idea.
I get the same sense from the Financial Times as well. If it's not a DA joint coalition, South Africa falls apart. And then I ask myself the question, okay, well, if it's not DA, then who's left over? And who are both of these articles sort of excluding when they do this? Well, they've already stated that the ANC is problematic. It's had a legacy of corruption, it's had a legacy of poor leadership, etc., etc. And then both the articles position the alternatives, whether they are these populist radicals, they are put on the outside. So that's the the EFF and MK. And this is one of the questions that I'm sitting with, because it feels to me that you're excluding the black voice, essentially. But is it? Or is it just the exclusion of leftist politics? And what does that mean?
I think it's both. But it's also at the ignorance of what's happening within the African National Congress, right? The articles seem to think that the elements that were a threat to the ANC now lie within the EFF and the MK, and there is no threat within the ANC. True as that may be to an extent, you're almost disillusioned to think that radical economic transformation no longer lies within the ANC, or that there aren't, to use espionage language, quote-unquote sleeper agents within the ANC who are willing to pursue that ideology.
I mean, I think that's also where it gets a little bit confusing, because you've got someone like Cyril Ramaphosa who leans more towards the right. He leans more towards capitalist business, but yet he's stuck within a party. And I use the word stuck because I think that's sort of the narrative that's been pushed out in the Daily Maverick and the Financial Times. He's a black man, but he's engaged in business, but at the same time politically held to the ANC. And on one hand, I sort of feel like, who is Cyril Ramaphosa then? You know, do we actually know who this gentleman is? Because I feel like he's in an organization where he's not able to express who he is and his ideologies, because he has to maintain the culture of the organization that he's within. And then if we look at these two articles, there seems to be a fear that once he's no longer there, South Africa is again in trouble.
I find it funny because it's almost an implicit submission to say that the ANC has been taken over. So the authentic ANC, in other words, is inclined to advance leftist politics. But here there's this man at the helm who's supposedly keeping a lid tight on these radicals within the ANC, which then defeats the purpose, because the point then is that the ANC traditionally is supposed to be a leftist organization, but there are always elements that divert its attention away from leftist politics.
I always think back to how the end of apartheid came about and those deals that were made between the ANC and this group of businessmen, and the drop of sanctions, and Melusi, was there not compromised from the get-go?
Good question. But maybe a better one is, what essentially motivated the establishment of the ANC over a century ago? Whose interests were they serving back then? Moving right along, Lana and I next discussed the headlines, starting with the Daily Maverick.
South Africa's GNU turns 1, a year of unity, friction, and some green shoots. Then we have the IOL, which says 1 year after landmark 2024 elections, South Africa is still waiting for a change. GNU stability and illusion. And then the Financial Times, is South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa running out of time? Question mark.
I won't lie, my favorite headline is the question one, which is the Financial Times one. I think it's clean, straightforward. Pretty much target is on you, my man. We have put you in this position. Our funders, people who own this newspaper, are asking questions directly to you. I'm not in favor of the IOL one just because it's not reader friendly. It's just too long. Yeah. It's complicated, too many messages. I don't understand what's going on there. The Daily Maverick headline uses literary devices, so it reads like literature.
The Daily Maverick, for me, definitely what stood out. I could tell there's a degree of optimism. So the optimism idea really stands out, the green shoots. And I think it gives credit to the fact that the GNU is only a year old, so can't expect to see massive changes. That, in contrast with the Financial Times, for me, signaled a bit of urgency. Is Ramaphosa running out of time? It's this idea of hinging everything on Ramaphosa. It's not the ANC, it's not the GNU, it's really, is he leader enough to take things forward, to keep things going? It's a little bit more pessimistic, it's a little bit more alarmist, but it does sort of give this urgency, this question mark. Is it going to survive, or is there enough time? And then the IOL, I think it just is what it is. I knew when I read the title, this guy is not in favor of the GNU. The GNU is a farce.
My take on the headlines? The Daily Maverick's use of juxtaposition and metaphor, particularly green shoots, evokes the image of a sprouting plant that needs care. It subtly encourages patience with the GNU, despite its contradictions. The Financial Times headline suggests high stakes. Running out of time. Running out of time frames Ramaphosa as a man under pressure, possibly even targeted, amplifying a sense of urgency. As for the IOL headline, well, as I told Lana, it reads like they tried to write the entire story in one sentence. But to give them some credit, by using a lead-style headline, maybe they were trying to reflect the GNU's inherent messiness. From a theoretical standpoint, and because I'm a blindie, I wondered whether the images chosen for these articles communicate any of the themes we've discussed so far. Do the images anchor the texts? Are they anchored by the texts? Or do they reinforce each other?
So the Financial Times, the leading image is of Cyril Ramaphosa, bolded out with his hands pressed together in a gesture of pleading, asking, like when you put your hands together and say, please, can I have this?
Sounds like a man who knows that the gun sights are on him. Give me another chance, please.
The picture is black and white, with the exception of his tie. They've taken out the color of his tie, obviously for color effect. Then positioned behind him are two photos, one from the EFF and one from the ANC. Both of them have a color filter over them. One, a red filter of the EFF, and it's of young people, obviously at a rally. They're quite joyous, laughing, waving flags. On the other side, you have an older population of people, again, what looks like a gathering. There's an ANC flag that's being waved.
It seems the Financial Times, through the image they've chosen, is asking readers, should this man be given another opportunity? He looks stuck between two worlds.
So the Daily Maverick has the four leaders of the various political parties that make up the GNU. We've got John Steenhuisen, and he's wearing his DA shirt. He's got a smile on his face, and all four of the men are walking forward. Then you've got GaytonMcKenzie in his suit. He looks like a man who's on a mission. Then you've got Cyril Ramaphosa, Dibra, you know what I mean? He's got his hand in his pocket, he's walking, and his facial expression is very serious. He's got a little bit of concern on his face. And then on the other side, you've got Peter Groenewald, who's looking off to the side. He's walking, he kind of just looks like he's just there, but he's there. All four of them are walking forward on an image of the South African flag, and then behind them is just a plain yellow background.
Interesting. It feels like the editors were leaning into the idea of friction, hence the different facial expressions and body language. It's like one of those forced group photos. Or maybe the photographer just got lucky. It's also interesting that the DA's regalia is the only visible party branding in the image. Based on Lana's description, no one else is wearing party colors. Is the Daily Maverick suggesting this is a DA-led GNU?
Then the IOL is probably the most boring picture I've ever seen, and it's literally of the entire national unity like they're in a class photo. You know, when everybody in an organization comes together and they have their official photo taken, it's just that picture.
What do these images tell you about the headline or the story itself? All of them for these articles?
Look, to be honest, I think the IOL picture is a little bit lazy. It's just a picture of the GNU. It doesn't really have much significance.
But maybe it's just communicating that the GNU is dull.
Yeah, I guess so. Like, it's not even worth the effort to find an image that is suitable.
Good people, you've heard our interpretation of the texts. Maybe you'll reach similar conclusions, or maybe not. But part of this will also depend on who the articles are aimed at.
Ideal reader for the Financial Times? Definitely somebody who's engaged in the business world, definitely somebody who is more conservative, somebody who's watching the economy, who has everything pinned on the success of the economy. I'd go so far as to say middle class. I'd even go so far as to say this article would appeal by and large to a white community or other people who are in business. The Financial Times positions the success of South Africa's economy being based on things like the USA being happy with South Africa making economic changes such as revisiting the BEE laws to please investors. It's definitely highlighting issues that investor confidence is premised on. So what could ruin investor confidence? In general, I would say people who are resistant to this, definitely people who look beyond the West as the main economic partner that South Africa can deal with. There seems to be this underlying narrative in the Financial Times that if we don't keep the United States happy, South Africa is doomed. Yeah, be that as it may, it is important that we keep these trade relationships open, but we do have other partners in the world. My question is, do we really have to please the states in order to keep them trading with us? Don't we have other bigger trade partners? I think resistant readers, definitely people who are critical of more right-wing politics or neoliberal politics.
To build on Lana's point, resistant readers, in this regard marginalized voices, are entirely absent from this piece. The authors quote economists, anti-left commentators, and the DA's most prized matriculant, John Steenhuisen. But where are the voices of other GNU members? Or everyday South Africans? Ironically, the IOL article provokes contrasting reactions depending on who is reading it.
Ideal reader for me would be somebody who doesn't necessarily agree with the government of national unity. The fact that the IOL article referenced people from the community that are affected by issues of service delivery, those for me would be the ideal reader. They're having their story told. They're having their voices at least somewhat entered into the realm of the news. And they're highlighting what this government is not providing for them. The resistant reader for the IOL, in my view, would be people who sort of hold on to this narrative that if we don't have a strong economy, if our economy is not growing, if business is not growing, we're in trouble. People who believe that if MK came into power, or that if the EFF had power, or if this other faction within ANC, if they come into power, South Africa is doomed. So the resistant reader for me would be these guys who hold on to this view of South Africa needing this, I say this lightly, but this almost white savior or this Western savior.
And finally, what about the readers likely to agree with or push back on the Daily Maverick's narrative?
The Daily Maverick article sort of struck me as a former Model C article. It's very much like this private school / former Model C school, Rainbow Nation, let's make things work, let's get rid of the old. If we work together, things will be great. So the ideal reader for me would be that South African that's open to working together, that's open to being this rainbow nation kid. But like you say, who's missing? And it really is the voice of what we don't see in this article. We don't see the rural voice. We don't see a township voice. We don't see the realities on the ground outside of these broad statements like service delivery, unemployment. People are sort of reduced to statistics, really.
So the ideal reader is suburban, as you say, and then what about the resistant reader?
I think the resistant reader is this person who is not urban, who's not middle class. It is a person who needs more than just assurance that economic growth is going to change conditions on the ground. You know, a person who needs to know and understand that tangible changes can be made. The rural child, kid from the township, you know, not necessarily somebody who lives in a leafy suburb that gets their lunch from Woolworths, that doesn't have to worry about, am I getting dinner tonight?
The conclusion. Post-analysis and commentary with Melusi Ncala.
I suppose the attitude adopted by many is a wait-and-see approach towards the GNU. Will it last? Who will misstep or blink first? For the more naive amongst us, the question is, will our lives change for the better soon? Meanwhile, the economic situation remains as dire as ever. Neoliberalism is on the ropes, yet more aggressive and relentless, targeting not only those who challenge it, but even those who have served it dutifully. The irony of this passive approach is that everybody knows what's wrong and who is responsible for the misery we face. Yet, for some reason, even among so-called progressives, there's a belief that the situation will somehow improve. It's a comforting thought, especially for those living in suburban South Africa as social justice activists, waiting for instructions on what to think and what to do. The sad truth is, you can't help but wonder if politicians are complicit in this sham. How else do we explain the complacency? Is it political strategy to behave predictably, indulging in gossip and clowning during press conferences, or staging the occasional court battle and Twitter war? This is what leadership has been reduced to in South Africa. The current iteration of the GNU will likely not last. The system is already marshalling new foot soldiers, preparing for the time when it will declare, out with the old, in with the new. That's why some individuals are eager to join government. Believe you me, a true revolutionary would recognize that the problem is systemic and thus would not seek mere reform. But in a world of smoke and mirrors, people fall for these contradictions. And politicians know this because the people are desperate for change. If only the people believed that change lies within them, that politicians tremble at the thought of people willing to sacrifice in order to wrest freedom from those withholding it. If that were so, the GNU story, whatever form it takes, would be a different one. The fog would lift.
Pomelus. Sure. Pomelus. Just keep on. Oh, you just... Uvelo finta, come on. Oh, come on. Finta. Insisted dealing alama interview. Exactly. But you just went like ukren, usho. Like ukatel, like you look tired. Sure, Mara. But let's finish these interviews, and then I think I've got a plan for the show. I think we've got a plan for the show. We can script it.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of The Thinking Behind It All, TTBIA. It's hosted and executive produced by me, Melusi Ncala. Assistance production by Jessie B, Naledi Ncala, and Lana Manson. Contributions by Mathibedi Mosiroe. The sound engineering and music is by DJ Darkness. And thank you, dear listener, for listening. Please spread the word to your friends, families, and lovers. Until next time, sharp, sharp, sharp.